Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and like I told y'all, Scott Turner was not making it to the end of the week. I told y'all he wasn't making it to the end of the week, and it is official. The Washington Commanders have officially fired offensive coordinator Scott Turner. We got to talk about everything, why this is a good idea, and why this may not have all been Scott Turner's fault, and we may regret it a little bit, but I think overall, especially in my opinion, it was definitely time to move on from Scott Turner. But it's not like firing Scott Turner solves all of the issues at all. We're going to dive into that. Y'all know how I feel about Scott Turner, the offensive line, and the quarterback position, and which I felt like was the biggest reason why our offense was so anemic. So we're going to dive into that. I'm going to bring advanced statistics and everything to that, but we also got to talk about who our next offensive coordinator may be, and there's a rumor from Benjamin Allbright that he's heard that Eric Bieniemy could be the next offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. We're going to dive into that and everything surrounding this situation. Of course, we're going to talk about what Ron Rivera said in his official statement, and we got to talk about how the writing was on the wall, how we pretty much knew this was going to happen. Like I said, I've been saying it for videos and live streams. Scott Turner wasn't making it to the end of the week. I'm surprised he even made it past that presser earlier today. You might as well just fired him before then and went ahead and announced it in that presser. I wouldn't be all late making this video. I saw after the presser that they didn't fire him. I was like, okay, maybe it's safe to take a nap. I wake up 2 hours later, see an hour before that Scott Turner was fired. Thanks, Ron Rivera. Thank you very much. And of course, we got to talk about some of the candidates out there that we may not even be attached to that I would like for us to bring in as offensive coordinators as well. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, like I keep saying, just because of the Commanders season being over does not mean Street Scores is over. Y'all know if anything, I do my best work in the offseason draft talk. I'm going to do my top 5 big board for each position that the Commanders need to draft. I'm going to do some film sessions on some of those players like Joey Porter, Anthony Richardson. Is he really as raw as people say? Of course, I'm going to do my free agency wish list. A lot of the guys that I want in free agency before we even get to the draft. Y'all know I'm doing all of the team building stuff, all of that, and the live streams continue as well. I'm a live stream pretty much most Sundays. I'm gonna try to do every Sunday, and we'll just open up the phone lines for y'all to call in and voice your opinions on whatever we're talking about. More than likely, it's gonna be free agency stuff, draft stuff, and especially after this firing Scott Turner, we're definitely gonna talk about that on Sunday. Can't wait to see those debate points right there. But yeah, man, make sure y'all stay tuned, man. The Commander season is over, which means the Street Scores channel is going up, if anything. Without further ado, let's get it. Well, JP Finley was the first to report it. The Commanders have chosen to part ways with offensive coordinator Scott Turner. And you could just tell by the way that Ron Rivera even spoke about Scott Turner in the press conference earlier today that I was talking about in the intro, that he was as good as gone. They asked that man, like, you know, how do you feel about Scott Turner? Do you plan on moving on from him and things like that? All Rivera basically said was, he did a good job. That's it. Like, there was no glowing endorsement or nothing. Like, he was like, hey, man, I'm going to say the bare minimum about this guy because he already in the backpack in his bags as we speak. Still don't exactly understand why they didn't just go ahead and announce that he was being fired during the press conference. There's no way immediately after the press conference they made the decision. Still don't exactly understand how we do a lot of things in this organization between Rivera, the front office, and everybody. But it is what it is. Like I said, Scott Turner wasn't making it through the week, so I'm not surprised at all. And now he is out after 3 years as offensive coordinator. Marks the biggest change to the staff to date since under Rivera. Remember, the only other person that's ever really been fired since Rivera's been here was Sam Mills III this offseason as defensive lines coach. Then we went to Jeff Zgonina, and then we had Ryan Kerrigan as an assistant defensive lineman, and that worked out beautifully. I mean, our defensive line talent finally started to show all of that first round talent that they had. They actually started to produce and be disciplined in their run lanes, and actually the main thing was penetrate and actually go after the quarterback and get in the backfield and things like that. Things that Warren Sapp was telling them that they needed to start doing more often in the offseason as well when he was just coming around to help. So maybe since we fired our defensive lines coach and brought in a new one, well, technically just promoted one that was already there, and they got way better. Maybe firing our offensive coordinator will make our offense way better. I'm hoping it's the same transition. We'll see. But here's the statement from Ron Rivera himself. I'm gonna go ahead and breeze through this because I know a lot of y'all may not even care, honestly. But quote, I met with Coach Turner today and informed him that we will be moving in another direction going forward with the offensive coordinator position. Unfortunately, we did not live up to the expectations and standard that I expected to see from our offensive unit. I felt it was best for a fresh start at the coordinator position heading into the next year. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Scott and thank him for his 3 years of service to our organization. I wish Scott and his family all of the best in the future, unquote. And you know, that definitely hurt Ron Rivera to fire him, man. Y'all know Ron Rivera is loyal to a fault, like way too loyal a lot of the times. And Scott Turner is the son of one of his best of NFL friends. And so I know that took a lot, man. I know that took a lot to finally fire him. And I feel like a bit of it is Scott Turner becoming the scapegoat for all of the problems, but we're going to talk about that later because like I said, Scott Turner was not the #1 issue, but I do agree that he had to go. And I'm going to explain why later, but right now it's said that reported by Darren Haynes that the Commanders head coach will hire a new offensive coordinator from outside the organization and not promote within. And that's a big step in the right direction. I do not want to just simply promote like Ken Zampese or something to offensive coordinator. I'm very happy that we're looking to the outside. That's step one. Step one is to decide that you're going to get an offensive coordinator from outside of the Commanders' current organization. That is a huge step in the right direction. Who knows? They could go with somebody that's terrible and we end up regretting that decision. But to me right now, the step #1 is to decide that you're going outside of the organization for your new offensive coordinator. It's crazy too, because remember, Scott Turner signed a 3-year extension last offseason, so he wasn't even done with his contract. That's why I was thinking that he may be a little bit more safe than I thought. But Scott Turner, you also got to remember, he's been with Ron Rivera for 7 years, dating back to Carolina, not even just the Washington Commanders. So I know that took a lot out of him to fire him, man. I know it did. He wasn't the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers for 4 years, but he was some type of offensive coach for the Panthers for 4 seasons before Ron Rivera came to the Commanders and brought Scott Turner with him. And another reason that this isn't surprising is that, I mean, recently players and others in the organization spoke about the inconsistencies of Washington's offensive philosophy and play calling and scheme and all of that. And it also seemed like there was a divide between Rivera's vision for what he wanted defensively, led by a power run game, and Turner's vertical passing attack. Just earlier today, during the season finale news conference, Rivera and general manager Martin Mayhew both emphasized the desire to be more of a physical running team with a 2-to-1 running to passing ratio, which I absolutely hate. And we're going to talk about that later when we're talking about offensive coordinators. I really hope we don't do that, but that's probably one of the main reasons they moved on from Scott Turner. Scott Turner wants to sling it around. Ron Rivera wants to run the ball, which I'm not. That doesn't make me very excited about who the next offensive coordinator is going to end up being anyway, because if they're going to come in here and be on the same page with Ron Rivera Martin Mayhew for this run-first offense, I think that's a terrible idea. I can go to a lot of statistics as to why being a run-first offense in 2023 makes absolutely no sense, but I feel like the #1 statistic, and we're going to move on immediately after this, is that 10 of the top 11 passing offenses in the NFL per DVOA made the NFL playoffs. Running the ball, fine, all fine and dandy, and maybe we can be that one other team that makes the playoffs without having a top passing attack. But 10 of the 11 top NFL passing attacks made the playoffs. Also, shouts out to Johnny Low Clowns 1613 in my comment section, who brought up the fact that the top 3 running backs didn't make the playoffs, the top 5 quarterbacks did. So this whole dinosaur philosophy of running the ball, as much as Martin Mayhew and Ron Rivera says they want to do, I'm not feeling it. If we really do that this upcoming 2023 season, Rivera needs to be fired, Martin Mayhew needs to be fired by the 2024 season, and we need to clean sweep everything and move on to a whole new coaching staff and front office, if that's what they really plan on doing in 2023. Also, thanks for letting it be known to everybody out there that if that's what you want to do, that's what you're going to do, and now they have the entire offseason to go ahead and plan against it. Thanks for that as well, Martin Mayhew and Ron Rivera. But yeah, remember, a lot of players did not like Scott Turner at all, man. Some players complained that it took too long in some games to get the ball to key playmakers, such as McLaurin, or some players said that they get away from the formula that was working in games and Scott Turner would outsmart himself. Now, I definitely agree with those. I super agree with both of those. I don't think it's a coincidence that Sam Howell gets thrown in there and suddenly our offense looks good. They're talking about this whole run first thing, run a lot, all of that, but I feel like 8 starting quarterbacks in 3 years has more to deal with it than your run philosophy, in my opinion. Maybe I'm just tripping. But moving on, Benjamin Allbright tweeted out, "I heard a rumor about Bieniemy after this season. We shall see," after somebody asked him who the Washington offensive coordinator could be. And that has me really excited, because that's somebody that will open up the passing game. That is the whole mind behind this whole Pat Mahomes thing. And after Tyreek Hill left, people were like, oh no, the Chiefs offense is going to take a step back. Eric Bieniemy said, I think not. And it was even confirmed by Andy Reid earlier this year that Eric Bieniemy is the one that's calling plays. He's not just doing the scheme and things like that. Eric Bieniemy is calling plays and everything. So if we bring him in as an offensive coordinator, let him call plays, let him design the offense and open this thing up. If Sam Howell's the quarterback, whoever you may want to draft, don't bring in a free agent. I say go ahead and open up the passing game. But that's why this rumor is a little weird to me, because again, like we just talked about, they talked about being extra run heavy, severely run heavy. And Eric Bieniemy and the Chiefs offense, like it's been the past few years, especially since Pat Mahomes has been there, has not been run heavy at all. They throw, and maybe run the ball. Think about running the ball. And that's why they can have pretty much any running back in their system. Fantasy football, well, y'all know it. Anybody that plays real fantasy football, you know whoever the Chiefs running back is, doesn't matter who it is, pick them up, because they're more than likely going to put up some pretty good numbers in random games because they're so pass heavy that when they finally do run the ball, defenses aren't expecting it, and the running backs get used in the passing game a lot. Again, for my fantasy football guys out there, you know. So like Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson don't really mix well with the way that Eric Bieniemy has been running his offenses since I've been noticing him. Since Pat Mahomes has been there at the very least. Just because Tyreek Hill left did not mean that the passing game took a step back at all. Them boys are still out there slanging it around. I'm hoping that's what we do if we bring them in, but that's why I'm thinking that we more than likely won't. That's an interesting rumor because that sounds like a huge clash, if there ever was one, between Ron Rivera Martin Mayhew and their next offensive coordinator potentially being Eric Bieniemy, who wants to do the exact opposite of what Rivera and Mayhew want to do, but so do I. I want to do the exact opposite as well. And before that Cowboys game against us on Sunday, I was down to bring in maybe Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator from the Cowboys, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator from the Lions. I would love to bring him in. The only problem is I don't see guys moving laterally to another team, especially this situation, which we're going to talk about later. While I'm pretty pessimistic about us potentially getting a good offensive coordinator right now at the time that we are currently in 2023. We're going to talk about that later with the whole ownership, Rivera and all of that. We'll talk about that last in the video. But also on top of that, I just don't really see a guy moving from offensive coordinator on one team to offensive coordinator on another team. They usually leave to become head coach somewhere else. Now, Cliff Kingsbury, the way he got fired, maybe he'd be willing to take an offensive coordinator job somewhere else, and I would take a risk on him, especially just for one season or something like that, because I think this next season is going to be a big trial season with new ownership and things like that. Again, I'm going to talk about that later. I mean, there's a lot of options out there, man. The Eagles offensive coordinator, the way that he developed Justin Herbert and then went over and developed Jalen Hurts, that man means business, man. I would love to bring him in as well. There's a lot of great candidates out there that, in my opinion, are better than Scott Turner. But again, Scott Turner was not the main problem. But tell that to a lot of the players. Here's Brian Robinson speaking on the offense. He tried his hardest not to throw Scott Turner under the bus, but he was also trying to speak his mind. Here's that interview from weeks ago after the Giants loss, if you haven't heard it yet. And now moving on, Logan Paulson has some interesting things to say about Scott Turner's firing. He said, quote, "If I was going to give Scott feedback, there wasn't a plan. You're calling a play because you like a play, but it wasn't leading to anything," unquote. Logan felt that he didn't call plays to set up subsequent plays, and that's what a good offensive coordinator is supposed to do. It's chess, not checkers. You're not calling this play right now because you think it's literally going to work right now. Maybe you call a certain couple of plays in the first quarter and then see how the defense react to it, so you can call it later on in the third and fourth quarter and be able to hit them with the counter punch if they see that same exact look. Logan Paulson felt like Scott Turner wasn't doing that, and even me watching the all 22, maybe not as much as Logan Paulson, also noticed that I wasn't seeing much of that either. Logan Paulson also thinks that Ron Rivera should hire an offensive coordinator that sees the offense the same way that he does. Quote, "At times I felt Ron would say something in the media, and on Sunday Scott would do something completely different. I felt like there was a difference in opinion," unquote. Those are both great points from Logan Thomas. Again, Ron Rivera basically even said it through the press conference today and things like that, that he wants to be run heavy. Scott Turner didn't want to be run heavy. So that's one thing. One thing I was mainly complaining about as far as Scott Turner going in that last game against the Cowboys was I felt like we didn't throw the ball enough with Sam Howell. I mean, winning the game was fairly meaningless other other than giving Sam Howell some confidence to take into the offseason. But what if he's not even your franchise quarterback? What if you end up drafting CJ Stroud? Then it's completely pointless anyway. But either way, I just felt like Sam Howell should have thrown the ball 30 plus times. There's no excuses. What are we trying to win the game so bad for? Why are we winning and trying to run the clock as if like we need to win this game? Let Sam Howell slang it, man. That was really frustrating me. And now I'm realizing that that was more so of a Ron Rivera thing than a Scott Turner thing. I mean, I always thought it throughout the season. I was like, I don't think Scott Turner wants to run the ball as much as we've been running it. I think that's more of a Ron Rivera thing. But now it's more than confirmed that that was Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew's fault while we ran the ball more than we threw it with Sam Howell in a game that we didn't need to win. I felt like that was the game, if any, to let him throw it 30, 40 times. If he makes mistakes, oh well. At least he has more tape on film for you to go through in the offseason and be like, don't do that, do that. This is why this throw went wrong. This is why this throw went well. All of that type of stuff. The more he threw it, I felt like, if anything, the more tape he had in the offseason to learn from. So it is what it is, man. That's neither here nor there. It's already in the past. But also, going against Scott Turner, here are the Commanders' rankings in yards per play and scoring offense over the past 3 seasons. In 2022, 28th in yards per play and 24th in scoring offense. In 2021, 21st in yards per play and 24th in scoring offense. And then in 2020, 31st in yards per play and 26th in scoring offense. So, I mean, technically over the past 3 years, we slightly improved, but it didn't go anywhere for real. It honestly was not good enough at all. Also, when you're scoring 18.9 points per game with McLaurin, Dotson, and Samuel, and Robinson, and Antonio Gibson, and I feel like a fairly talented tight end group that we need to develop, that's inexcusable. But hold on, pump the brakes, because now we're getting to the part where I'm talking about, I think firing Scott Turner was a good idea, but let's not act like he was the only issue or even necessarily the number one issue with why our offense was so bad. First of all, don't blame Scott Turner for Carson Wentz, because now we've seen from 3 years on 3 different teams that he just hasn't worked out. Jay Gruden even talked about it. Quote, I don't think Scott Turner had a lot to do with the offensive struggles. I think it was more personnel issues at key positions, but that's just me. Unquote. He said that the QBs played poorly and they weren't good enough on an interior offensive line to even hold up the passing game. You saw Scott Turner wanted to do a bunch of dropbacks and a lot of passes, but we didn't have the offensive line to do that, and so they were forced to pretty much run the ball just like Rivera and Mayhew wanted them to do anyway. And then the main thing, I think quarterback play. I mean, I just felt like Scott Turner was definitely dealt a terrible hand. I wouldn't be surprised to see Scott Turner go to another team and now suddenly he looks like a genius. He had flashes of genius, but he also had a lot of flashes of what are you doing? What are you thinking? I see both, but don't act like it was just all bad under Scott Turner and like it was all his fault. Like I said, I felt like a lot of games we lost was because of quarterback play. I felt like a lot of games we lost was because of offensive line. And then there were also some games that we lost because of Scott Turner probably being the number one answer. But I would think over the season, Scott Turner is not number one. I would say quarterback play and offensive line are having a tug of war on who was the most to blame for this offense being so terrible this season. And Scott Turner's like a really close third in my opinion. I mean, I heard a complaint about how he doesn't adjust the offense to fit his players. And y'all know Mark Bullock watches more film than anybody. And he even said, I mean, his QB and offensive line change almost every week. How do you fit the scheme to fit those guys? And like I said, if you really watch all 22, you'll see that receivers were open a lot. In the red zone, all of that, and Taylor Heinicke or Carson Wentz just simply wouldn't see them, or they would throw it late, they would throw it too early, they would throw an inaccurate pass, and it wouldn't matter. And all of the scheming, all of the getting receivers open, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, everybody being open didn't matter. And I wasn't surprised when Sam Howell stepped in his first game of his NFL career, and this offense just suddenly looked better. My whole point this whole season, y'all have heard me say it several times. Again, I'm happy that we moved on from Scott Turner. I am ready to go to another offensive coordinator, a better one, because I felt like we could do better than Scott Turner. I also feel like we can definitely do worse than Scott Turner, but I do feel like we can do better. And y'all know me, I'm a risk taker. I'm gonna shoot for the stars. If I miss, then I just miss. I don't like playing it safe. If you want to play it safe, Scott Turner could be a good option for you because he's nowhere near as bad as people act like he is. But at the same time, me personally, I want Pat Mahomes at quarterback. I want Josh Allen at quarterback. I'm taking big swings. I want Eric Bieniemy at offensive coordinator. I want the top coordinators type of thing. I want a Sean McVay, a Kevin O'Connell, a Matt LaFleur, if you see the pattern. But my main thing has been, and I've said it several times in live streams and videos, I would prefer Scott Turner and Pat Mahomes than Taylor Heinicke and Eric Bieniemy. That's been my main point this whole time. Scott Turner, again, I'm happy that we're moving on for reasons I've already stated, but I felt like it was quarterback more than anything else. And now that we see that Rivera and Martin Mayhew wanted Scott Turner to do one thing and Scott Turner wanted to do another, Scott Turner wasn't even able to do what he fully wanted to do, especially with the offensive line and quarterbacks that he had. So even there, he didn't even have the support of his head coach and his GM. So, man, he was going through it, man. And shouts out to Chris Cooley for 3 points that he made on Twitter about it. He tweeted, only thing I'll say about Scott Turner, and I'm going to mute this because he already knows he's going to get a lot of hate because a lot of people hate Scott Turner at an irrational level. I understand wanting to move on from him, but completely thinking that everything was his fault is pretty crazy. He said he was a young coordinator that needed to develop as a play caller. Asking him to do that with horrible QB play for 3 straight years made it basically impossible. To ask your offensive coordinator for success with 8 starting QBs in 3 years is unfair. What he had in 3 years: bad QB play for 3 years, bad receiving core for 2 years, and a bad O-line this year. I think he can be good when given the right tools and the time to learn and develop. And then lastly, he tweeted, I'm also very curious about how much influence Ron Rivera's run-first mentality influenced the play calling. It's also why I'm hesitant on being excited for a new offensive coordinator. Rivera's going to dictate what type of offense he runs anyway. And I completely agree with all of those points. That's basically where I'm at with it, where, I mean, yeah, I'm ready to move on from Scott Turner, but are we even sure the next offensive coordinator is going to work? And what offensive coordinator could have made those conditions work with, again, bad QB play for 3 years, bad receiving core for 2 years, and bad O-line this year? One of the worst pass blocking O-lines in the NFL this year. And Scott Turner isn't the one that decides who plays offensive line for the Commanders. And then now, my last point, who wants this job? I mean, you're either that far or you're that desperate. Because if you think about it, Ron Rivera has one last year here, more than likely. Because if you wanted to fire Ron Rivera right now, you couldn't. Dan Snyder isn't selling the team till March or April. By then, the head coach hiring cycle is over with. The 2023 window to hire a new head coach is gone. So we have to keep Ron Rivera for at least one more year. The new owner is just going to acquire Ron Rivera. And so there's even a huge chance that we hire a new offensive coordinator this year, and then he ends up getting fired with Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew the following year, going into the 2024 offseason. So who even wants to come into that position? Either you're that desperate to just take that 1 year chance and just do whatever you got to do, and you may not even be that qualified, but you're desperate, so you're like, man, I'll take it. I know these other guys don't want to be the offensive coordinator in a situation like this, but I'll do it, which doesn't sound good for us as Commanders fans and as a team. Or you're just that far where we just somehow bring in a guy like Eric Bieniemy, and the offensive coordinator outlasts the head coach and the defensive coordinator and all of that, and the GM. We bring in Eric Bieniemy or somebody else that's really good as an offensive coordinator, and we just expect them to outlast the head coach and all of that, where Ron Rivera gets fired the following year, and then the new head coach decides to keep him. That doesn't sound very likely, man. So this is a very ugly situation for whoever wants to be the defensive coordinator. I'm pretty sure Eric Bieniemy is looking at that situation like, I don't know, man. But at the same time, P. Haley brings up a good point. There are only 32 NFL teams. Someone will accept the risk and come on board. But, whew, I don't think it's going to be... I don't think we have everybody who's jobless out there as candidates for us, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't want to deal with this, man. Also, Disco brings up a great point on Twitter, and with the new offensive coordinator, we're setting it up where Howell could potentially have his third offensive coordinator in 3 years. Scott Turner this year, then next year, whoever they bring in, and then again, if Ron Rivera gets fired, more than likely will with new ownership, whether Ron Rivera does a good job or not, new ownership may want to bring in a different head coach, and that head coach will more than likely want to bring in a new offensive coordinator. So again, Sam Howell will be on to his third offensive coordinator in 3 years, and that doesn't sound like a good setup for success at all, but maybe he can outlast it. We'll see. But that's what's really interesting even about us drafting a quarterback, like trading up for CJ Stroud. You trade up for CJ Stroud, new owner comes in, fires head coach, fires current offensive coordinator. Now you have a quarterback that owner and that head coach and that offensive coordinator did not draft. Whether it's Sam Howell or CJ Stroud or any quarterback that we draft, we may just end up waiting to take a quarterback until new owner, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new GM in the 2024 draft when Caleb Williams, Drake May, and all of those guys are coming out. So you see where I'm going with this, right? But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And as always, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose names you see scrolling on the screen right now. My main point is Scott Turner did have to go, but don't act like it was all his fault. That's my main point here. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.